What if the way you've been telling your life story reveals the secret to what is holding you back? Stories play an integral part in how we see not only ourselves, but the whole world. Stories are more than just an important part of communication. They also reveal hidden aspects of our inner talk, which can either support us or end up holding us back from the very things we want most in life, without us even realizing it. Join author, mindset coach, and award-winning singer-songwriter Carrie Rowan on her show, Look for the Good, every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. when she shares nuggets of wisdom from her internationally best-selling book, Tell a New Story, 5 Simple Steps to Release Your Negative Stories and Bring Joy to Your Life. Carrie's powerful stories and compelling guests will empower you to change how you look at your own life while giving you some powerful tools and tips you can use every day to help you feel better and move yourself closer to the life you've been longing to live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Look for the Good. I'm your host, Carrie Rowan, mindset strategist and coach, and I just love sharing nuggets of wisdom about the stories that we tell each other, but more importantly, those stories that we tell quietly to ourselves. And you can join me and my special guests as we share our personal stories of strength and triumph every week here on Dreamvisions7 Radio Network. You can listen online on your mobile device, in your car, or even ask Alexa to play Dreamvision7 Radio. And you can tune in every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time to get real stories and tips on how to turn your story and your life around and evolve with us as we unite humankind with universal love. And hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here on this beautiful fall Friday to talk about some incredible things. We're going to talk, I love talking about stories. We're always talking about those stories, those little stories we tell ourselves. And today we're really focusing on the artist in all of us. And you'll understand when I talk to you about my amazing special guest, because creativity is our birthright. And here's the interesting thing I find about those creativity stories that we tell. A lot of times people will tell me, clients that come on board with me will tell me, I'm just not creative at all, right? Like we hear this a lot and I'm like, wait, what? You were born into creativity. We are all creative. And I love talking about the expression of our creativity. And it starts with that story right there, that story that says you're not creative, because I'm here to tell you that we are all creative because we are of the creator. So how could we not be creative? I think what happens is that we forget. We forget what we used to do as kids because kids are so creative. They're just tapped into the purity of who they are, and we just do what we think we're meant to do. And then, life squeezes it out of us. School squeezes creativity out of kids, which is such a shame. Um, and so it's that creative story. It's that story that you can turn around to yourself and say, hey, you know what? We're all creative. What is my creativity? What do I bring? Maybe somebody, making a beautiful dinner is their creativity. Or they're a really incredible organizer, and that's how they love to create. It doesn't have to just be the artists like Joseph and I are. But then again, there are us who really want to take on the big creative challenges, like bringing music into your lives. And you guys know that I'm super multifaceted here, and I'm also a musician. Um, but it takes so many forms of creativity, the writing and the music and the art. I have friends who actually, put pen to paper or they put pencil and even watercolors. So it doesn't matter what your creativity is. I just want you to embrace it today. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about how it really improves your humanness. It improves your soul. And it really, I'm going to dare to say that creativity is the spark of life. If you and when you bring creativity back to your own life, you will find that every single relationship in your life improves, especially the one with yourself, because you've just forgotten that you came here to be creative. And I'm hoping that today that we can really spark that creativity in you. And I'm here to talk with Joseph Arnold. Hello, Joseph. Welcome to the show.
I am so thrilled to be here, Carrie. Thank you so much.
So good to have you on, my friend. And we are, Joseph is really an incredible musician. And let me just read you his bio. So, Joseph Arnold is a masterpiece mentor, multi talented violinist, Alexander Technique teacher, and author of the award winning Soul Force: How to Discover Your Artistic Purpose, Create More Freely, and Make Art That Matters. I love that, Joseph. And
Hmm.
again, welcome. I'm super excited to talk about this because it's so my jam.
Yeah, totally.
So, talk to us about, one of the things that I find with a lot of the amazing people who come on my show, and a lot of them have books and are authors, and we have so much in common, being both book authors, best-selling authors, and creatives. And what I love is that a lot of times our businesses as entrepreneurs are created out of that very hard, worst story of ours, right? That
Mm,
worst story that when we were in the middle of it, we just couldn't see the good ending coming out of it
mm,
until we did. And that becomes our overcomer story, right? That becomes our
mm,
triumph, our turnaround story. Tell us what led you to this Soul Force work and Soul Force arts,
mm.
and how did this personally affect you, and how did you turn that around?
Yeah. Well, I have been a violinist my whole life. I started when I was 5 years old, and I loved playing violin right from the beginning. I loved performing. I would play for the plumber who came to our house. I would play out on the front porch of my house, whenever I had a chance. And so went to music school because I thought, hey, going to music school would just be a continuation of that. I'd learn how to be like a great performer and just have fun being a violinist. But what I discovered was something very different. Instead of
Right.
sort of nurturing environment for the artist that my soul wanted to be, I found a factory for
Mm.
getting the notes right.
Oh,
And, there's nothing wrong with getting the notes right, but that's only one small part of the whole picture of what it really takes to be a full artist.
yeah.
And so what happened for me was that it was so stressful. I was so tense while playing violin that I had repetitive strain injuries in both arms.
Wow.
So it was like tendonitis, and it spread not just my arms, but other parts of my body. I could barely play violin anymore. And, I sought advice from my violin teacher. He said, you know what, you should learn how to relax. And I thought, okay, how do I do that? He had no practical advice. He was right, but there was no practical advice. And it
Hmm.
started a whole journey, like seeing doctors and physical therapists and chiropractors, you name it, I tried it. And I learned some helpful things. I got some temporary relief, but over a year later, I was still in pain. I didn't know if I was going to be able to be a professional violinist like I had wanted to. And so I actually ended up taking this class on something I'd never heard of. It was called the Alexander Technique. And in this class, the teacher was talking about things that I had never considered before. So like she was talking about like how I was using my body while I was playing music, and I was so disconnected, Gary. I was so
Mm.
disconnected from my body that I didn't even know I had a body. I thought, how could this be relevant to
Right.
the creative act? I just want to play the pieces.
Exactly.
But what I discovered was that my body turned out to be my greatest source of creative pleasure and creative inspiration and energy. So what happened was this: I learned how to use my body with so much less tension, so much more
Mm.
ease, and that's really what the Alexander technique is about. Learning how to do that in whatever it is you do. It's not just about music or the violin. And on the one hand, what that did is that it relieved the pain I was having. The pain was coming because I was so tense while playing violin, and I learned how to play violin with much more ease. And so that
Mm.
put a lot less strain on my muscles, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't in pain anymore. But there were these other remarkable effects. Like when I was playing with less tension and more fluidity, my technique got so much better. I could just
Mm.
do things that I couldn't do before. It just
Wow.
happened more easily. Whoa, that's amazing. And my sound quality, the resonance of my violin became much more full and rich. The
Mm.
violin is like a wooden bell. And if
Mm.
you're squeezing it, then you're squeezing that bell, you're dampening its ability to resonate. And this isn't just about violins. Like creativity in general is about resonance. We
Mm.
could get into that if you wanted to. But
Yes.
but then the other thing that happened was because there was so much less tension in my body while I was playing, my creative soul force, my creative energy was able to come through my playing. It's like the garden hose got unkinked.
Mm, great
And
analogy.
yeah, what was so amazing about that was that I didn't have to try harder to be creative. I didn't
Mm,
have to try harder to be expressive. I had made that mistake in my life, just somehow unconsciously believing that using more effort, trying harder would bring greater efficacy,
yeah,
so better results. But it just doesn't.
it's
A
so
certain
true.
a certain kind of effort is needed, but it's not this trying hard constriction kind of effort. And it's much more of an allowing, letting
Mm,
go kind of effort. And when I was able to get to that place, my playing just came from the soul so much more often. And I would hear this from my audiences, like, wow, they were just, get goosebumps. They would be so touched by what I was doing, even though in a certain sense, it didn't feel like I was doing anything at all.
mm. Isn't that when you know, right? You're in your flow, right?
Yeah,
You're so connected. It's just coming through you.
yeah,
It's like you've become one with the violin, right?
yes,
Instead of it
exactly.
being this thing you're clenching, you guys became one. It became
Yeah,
this one fluid flow, and an
yeah,
expression of your soul and what
yes,
you're here to do, right?
yes, yeah. And, I had heard ideas like that from lots of different sources, from other musicians and artists and, spiritual teachers, but I never knew what to make of it. I never knew how to get there, right? I didn't have the practical skills to get there. And so things like the Alexander technique gave me those practical skills, how to release tension
Mm.
in the moment when I would normally get most tense. It gave me those practical skills, and that's what unlocked everything for me. And and so over the years, I've just been fascinated by this process. I became an Alexander Technique teacher, so I was teaching this to other musicians who would come see me, and also my young violin students. And so I got to see countless times how this sort of unkinking, unconstricting, um, how that led to creative magic.
Mm.
Even in my young violin students, it was so touching. And so I gathered information about this, gathered all these experiences and learned how to teach this in lots of different ways, learned how to implement it myself in lots of different ways. And I became uh, really dedicated to helping artists get in touch with this creative flow, what I now call soul force. And what my book is about is like, what are the practical skills? What are the mindsets necessary to center this, put soul force back in the center of the creative process, the process of how we learn to create, how we share our creations, because so often it gets sidelined in pursuit of other things. It's squashed. We
So
find
true.
ourselves just going through the motions as opposed
Yeah.
to channeling that soul force.
Experience being in the moment, in the
Yeah.
experience, right? Which is really
Yes.
where it is. So it's interesting because then you want to add so now you got the creativity piece and now you've got the performance piece. And I think that's where a lot of the anxiety comes from, right? The having
Absolutely.
to perform
Yes.
versus I'm sharing, right? It's like that
Mhm.
mindset. Share what some of those mindsets, so those mindset shifts, because we love talking about
Yeah.
mindset stuff here. How did you shift that from, oh my God, I got to go perform this piece and it's just you looking at notes versus the channeling, the
Yeah.
allowing? We all know what you mean. How do you close that gap?
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to the purpose behind what you're doing.
Mm,
So, for instance, in my own performance anxiety, a long time ago when I was suffering with that, I could looking back on that, I can see that the purpose behind my performances at the time was to like, avoid shame, basically.
right.
Get up in front of
Public
these people.
humiliation.
Yeah, just putting off public humiliation
right.
as much as I could. And so, that was sort of my unconscious central
uh-huh.
focus, my
Right.
purpose at the time. And and so I would get so tense and scared because, whoa, if I get one note wrong, then I'm worthy of shame, right?
I get
And
it.
and so there are stories like that
Yeah.
within so many of us.
So,
And
yeah.
what that really the performance anxiety really hinges on is whether or not like something like that is your central aim, even if you're doing it unconsciously in the creative act, whatever you're doing. And the sort of big insight that I share in the book is that the arts are about something else, something bigger than simply avoiding shame or trying to prove your worth to others. Things like that. These are some of the most common stories.
Mm-hmm.
And and so to me, the arts have this larger purpose, and it's something we all know, I think, in our hearts, and it's to bring us more alive, to inspire, to heal, to connect with something larger than our individual selves. This is what the arts are supposed to do, and the extent to which a work of art can do that, whether it's a piece of music or a dance or a poem or a painting, the extent to which it can bring us more alive is the extent to which this is a masterpiece. A masterpiece is what does that. And it to create something that helps bring yourself, your art, those around you more alive is a very, very different intention than avoiding shame, proving your worth in the eyes of others. And I mean, there's often a long process of sort of getting the rest of your psyche on board with a new intention like that. But
Mm-hmm.
what I find is just naming the purpose of the arts to my students and the other people I talk to about all of this. I can feel them relax. I can see them relax. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it's about. And then that moment of recognition is what allows them to start, turning the boat in a new direction, right? Because they have a new purpose to hold on to. Like, oh yeah, this is why I've been creating all this time, and I just couldn't put words to it. And so this is one of my gifts. One of my insights with the book is to name that and to show all the ways in which that purpose, all the different ramifications for this deeper purpose in how we create, perform, practice, teach, make a living.
Oh, that is, I so feel that. That is so, you said that so beautifully because it's really the difference between fear and love,
Yeah.
right? It's the two opposing things. It's the fear that is the shame and the fear that we'll get it
Mm,
wrong and the fear that everybody will know, all that stuff versus letting it flow, letting the love, letting the, whatever you want to call that energy, the universe flowing through you. And I love that you're teaching this at such a young age because when they can learn to let that
mm,
go, it's the feeling. They know there's some other
yeah.
reason that they keep coming back, even if they do get kicked down, because we all do with our
Yeah.
art. And they keep coming back because they know deep in their soul that they're meant to do that. You said that it's your gift, right?
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. We're gonna break really quick, guys, on this note. No pun intended. And we'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Look for the Good. I'm here with Joseph Arnold, and we are having an incredible conversation. And I love the last thing we were talking about, your gifts. You mentioned your gifts. And in my book, I talk a lot about my dad saying to me, Carrie, you have these gifts. And when you're given these gifts, whatever you guys believe in, he said, when God gives you these gifts, it's your responsibility to share them with the world. That's why you have them. And I always felt that as a young kid, which is why I went back to my music after being in the corporate world. Talk to us about your gifts. Like teaching people to own their gifts is such a beautiful thing to do.
Absolutely. One of my starting places is to sort of think about all the different examples of gift in the arts. And to me, what makes something art different than a commodity is that it has some of what I call the spirit of the gift in it.
Mm,
And there's so many different examples of gifts in the arts. You call your talents your gifts. You call your teachers. They're sharing their gifts with you. Your cultural heritage is a gift
mm,
that comes to you. Even the capacity to work hard, to express yourself. All of these are gifts. And it's like we didn't earn any of these things in a sense.
mm,
And I think connecting with just that recognition that your you your creativity, uh, this is a gift for your audiences, uh, really helps reframe what the arts are about.
Sure
You know, the
does.
arts are not a commodity. The arts are not like a construction of some kind, or simply something you make for the money or for the fame or anything like that. Those None of those things are exactly gifts. And so gifts have a few different qualities to them. There's sovereignty, meaning when you give a gift, or it has to be freely given or freely
Mm-hmm.
received. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense of relationship when you give a gift, that you become closer with those you give, and when you receive something, you become closer. This is why we don't sell gifts to each other on birthdays and holidays, right? We give gifts because it uh, brings us closer.
Yeah.
And one of the framings that I often share with artists is that the entire creative process is just filled with gifts. There are different phases of the creative process. There's actually five of them in how I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The first is the trying hard phase. This is where
Mm-hmm.
you're putting in the work. Maybe you're banging your head against the wall, and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure it out. And that leads to the failure, which is the second phase, which is failure. And
Mm-hmm.
even the failing phase has its gifts, because you have to be able to see that all of that hard work, even though it does bring its own gifts, is in the end insufficient for true creative inspiration. And so we need to have that failure moment and give
Yes.
up, surrender, like, oh, it's not happening right now. This is necessary to receive the following gift, which is
Mm.
the time of inspiration that happens during rest. So you've put
Yeah.
down your pen, you've put down your keyboard, your violin, whatever it is, and you go do something relaxing, or you do something else, and then boom, you get that
Mm.
moment of insight, which again is a gift. It comes out of nowhere. It's not something that you sort of manufactured into existence. You set up the proper uh, conditions by doing the hard work and by failing,
Mm-hmm.
and then resting, and then boom, the creative inspiration just comes out of nowhere. It's a gift.
It's a beautiful gift. I love that moment for sure. All right,
Yeah,
with
and
you, we
then
want the rest of them.
yeah, right. And then your job after that is to take this gift and to honor it.
Mm.
Just like you were saying with the story with your dad,
Yeah.
like we're all given certain gifts, and you know, just using the language of God, you can use your own language, but how do you think God would react if he or she, gave you this gift and you didn't develop it?
Mm.
Right? How do you feel when somebody gives you, or you give somebody a gift and they don't treat it well? They ignore it, right? It's not very fun, right? So what would it be like for God if you have these creative gifts and you don't develop them, right?
Mm.
Is that showing God that we want a world of more beauty and life, or is that showing God we want a more dead kind of world, more
Mm.
mechanized kind of world, a world where we tend to ignore our gifts more often than
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
It,
Commercial
it,
comes to mind.
right, right, and so this to me is one of the sacred purposes of the arts, which is to connect with the gifts that we have, the gift that you are,
Mm.
because this is really what your audiences want from you. They don't want to hear you get the notes right. They don't want your commercial success necessarily. I mean, those things
Mm-hmm.
are fine,
Mm-hmm.
but what they want is the gift of you, your soul force pouring through.
Mm.
And when you do that, you bring more of that life, more of that energy, and you say yes to soul force. You say yes to bringing life into the world through your art, and that to me is the great gift, the great purpose, the great role of arts in our society today. I look around in our world, and there's just so much chaos and strife. And how do we, as artists, what do we do? What's ours to do?
Mm.
It's not to abandon our art in favor of something more practical. These are our gifts.
Mm.
This is what we've trained for. This is our moment. This is our moment to shine.
Yeah.
If we if we remember that this is what we're here to do,
Yeah.
and so this is my message, helping people remember, oh, this is what we're here to do. And even though it's really difficult, and even though so much of our world, our society says the arts don't really matter, the arts are just kind of nice entertainment, luxury hobbies. It's like, no, that's not true.
So
we have
not
these
true.
we have these very special gifts, and the world needs us to show up with those.
The world needs us. And only in the way that you, Joseph, bring it in your special flavor, and in the way that only I can bring it in my special flavor. You can look around and say,
Yeah.
oh, well, this is the Taylor Swifts of the world and all these
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you being you, distilling
Yes.
that down into the wholeness of who you really are, because
Yes.
everybody has a different message. Everybody has their gift shared in a very unique way. It's as unique as your fingerprint or a
Yes.
snowflake. It's your signature,
Yes.
right?
That's right. That's right. When we live in a sort of a worldview based on Newtonian dynamics, mechanics, the Cartesian worldview, where to create a big change, you need a equally big force. And so this is how we think about how we make an impact on our world, right? And one of the pain points that a lot of artists, a lot of people have in general is like, how do I make a positive impact?
Mm.
I'm only just one little person. Like
Hmm.
I'm not Taylor Swift or somebody with tons of money or political influence.
Sure.
Where do I fit in with all this? Do I just forget about it and hope that things go well, or try to gain all this money and power? And to me, the answer is no. Um, you can think of like who was Mahatma Gandhi's grandmother, right? And how did her love and care, which never got recognized on the global scale, how did her love and care, you know, help Mahatma Gandhi become who he was, right? So there are
Right.
billions of us whose unacknowledged, unseen works of love, acts of love and care, and affirmation of life. There are billions of us who do this every day, and this is what holds the world together.
Yeah.
This is what prevents World War III.
It's so true. And especially in times of uncertainty, people turn to art, right?
Yes. Yeah.
In the whole, COVID experience, people turned to online art. Art was not stopping. Yeah, we weren't going to our gigs, but we were getting creative in other ways, right? To
Mm,
still get that out there, to help the people. I launched my book during COVID, not
mm,
meaning to, it's just the way it
mm.
happened. And I said, you know what? I'm doing it anyways, because maybe this is exactly what the world needs to hear.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just knowing, like you said, giving it a purpose, and knowing when your purpose is connected to something higher, something more than just one person, because we've already mentioned that it's not just us here creating. We're really just channeling, we're allowing this to run through us, to be a conduit, if you will,
Yeah.
to get the message of the universe out, because that's really what we're doing. That's what inspiration is.
Mm,
If it's just showing up, well, it's coming from somewhere.
yeah.
And maybe this is the message, the new message that the world needs to hear. Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how can people allow that, right? Because yeah, I love what you were talking about. Let's just do. Let's run,
Mm,
run, run. Create more music. It's
yeah.
like music.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way. It's more organic. It's more pure.
Yeah.
How do we allow it? Whatever our creativity looks like for somebody. Talk to us a little bit about that. How do we allow more of it into our lives?
Yeah. Well, I could talk about it and give you some nice concepts and intellectual things, and I'm really good at that. But I really love having the embodied experience. So let's just go through a
Love it.
brief experience that I often offer my students and at other events. So yeah, so kind of deciding between two different ideas. Okay, let's go with what I call spacious awareness.
Mhm.
And what this is about is bringing that quality of allowing into those moments of doing. That's really where the
Mm.
rubber hits the road. Because we could, have this dichotomy in our minds that the doing mode is one thing, and then the allowing and, being at ease and being connected is another thing. But if you have that dichotomy in mind, then you won't be able to bring the two together. And
Mm.
that's where soul force happens.
Yeah.
It's in bringing your wholeness, aliveness, connection to those moments of challenge. So we're going to do this together. You
Okay.
bring up your two hands in front of you like you're going to thread a needle. You have your invisible needle, your invisible thread, and go ahead and try to put that thread through that little tiny needle hole. It's like, oops, you missed. Oh, that hole is so tiny, isn't it? Okay, so what's
Yes.
happening to your sense of space? Is your sense of space how much you're aware of getting smaller or bigger?
Smaller.
Yeah. And what happens in your body when your sense of space gets smaller? Do you get tighter or freer?
Yeah, everything just went. Yeah,
Yeah,
my whole body
exactly.
crunched down.
Right? This happens for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
And can think of how much of your life are you in this kind of crunched mode?
Trying to thread a needle, literally,
Yeah,
figuratively, or
absolutely.
like this.
Absolutely. On the
Yeah,
phones. Yeah,
yeah.
just like happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the opposite of a small sense of space? It's a big sense of space. So
Mm.
let's do a little experiment. Look up, look around you, look to either side, look below. Remember, there's a whole room, a whole space outside your room. There's the
Mm.
sky above, right? So when you have a larger sense of space, what happens for your body? Do you get tighter or freer?
Ah, I felt very free. I loved that.
Great. So now we're going to bring the two together because this is where it gets practical. You could
Mm.
space out all the time, and that's a really nice thing to do if you're just relaxing or in meditation. But how are you going to get through that difficult meeting? How are you going to thread that needle? How are you going to play that piano concerto or do whatever it is without getting so tight and constricted? Right. So here we go. We're going to take our needle and thread back again. And this time, as you take a look at your imaginary needle and thread, you're going to remember that there's a space all around you. There's space below, space above, space to either side. There's a sky above you. And go ahead and pretend to thread that needle a couple times, remembering that the space inside that needle hole is continuous with the space all around you.
Mm. Way easier to thread it.
Way easier to thread it. That's
Yeah,
right. And
yeah.
what do you notice in your body, tighter or freer?
Oh, way freer. My arms. Yeah, I was not all crunched up like I was the first time. I
Right,
love that. Yeah.
right. So again, there seems to be this common unconscious belief that so many of us carry that constricting, tightening, trying harder in whatever it is that you do, pushing through, that's going to lead to greater effectiveness. But it
Whoa.
just doesn't, because what that ignores is that when you get tighter, when you get more stressed like that, that actually interferes with your ability to do the very thing you want to do.
That's the irony.
And this is so clear with something like playing music, where if you're getting tighter, you're trying harder to make a nice sound, but then that all that tension just gets in the way of your ability to make that nice sound. There are so many examples of that,
So many.
and in relationships as well. The more you try to get the other person to do what you want to do, the less likely they're going to do it, right?
Does not work out well.
So instead of avoiding those challenges, those problems, instead of, I don't know, numbing yourself out or compensating for it in all the ways that we do, what you can do is come to that same exact challenge and just notice the space around you. Notice the
Mm,
space around that challenge.
yeah.
And that'll give you like the mental space, the physical space to allow for new creative ideas to come up. When you're so constricted, it's not just a problem with your body. It's because your body is like the source of your creative impulses. If you notice where creativity comes from, like sometimes it's a thought, yes, but oftentimes there'll be this energetic, emotional impulse that
Mm,
comes along with the thought. And if
hmm.
you're really tight in your body, you're just not going to feel those. You're
Yeah.
going to miss them. And so you're going to
Yes.
miss creative ideas for how to deal with whatever challenge you have in new ways that don't involve so much constriction, in new ways maybe that even feel really good.
Yeah, well, how I love that because I wrote down earlier when you were talking about your tightness and your everything that you struggled with, you couldn't hear the whispers of the body. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing,
Yes.
hearing the whispers of
Yes.
the inspiration that's coming
Yes.
towards us at all times, and I've heard people describe it as, catching that song in the air,
Yes.
catching
Absolutely.
it in the universe because it's always sending stuff out to us. It's being able to hear that and hear our bodies when something's off. It's really beautiful the way you described it. All right, we're gonna go away for a second because I got a message from a sponsor coming up. But you know what? Don't go anywhere because we've got a special treat when we come back. Stay tuned and look for the good. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Look for the Good. I'm here with Joseph Arnold, and do I have a treat for you? He's going to play violin for us right now. So we're going to just relax and kind of feel yourself getting into the flow. And I'm so excited about this. Go take us away, Joseph. Goosebump inducing. I almost burst out crying. I don't know why. It's so beautiful. That was so beautiful. The
Thank you.
sound
Thank you.
quality. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the gift that you just gave us all.
Mm,
That was really, really beautiful.
my pleasure.
Yeah, that was just gorgeous. I love there's so much intonation there's just so much going on with that instrument, And I'm so impressed with the non-fretted instruments. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, nobody knows.
No, exactly. It's just such an innate. If people don't know what I mean, a guitar that I play guitar and or the piano, you can see where you're going, and it's
Yeah,
separated by frets, right? So you can know what fret you're in. But the violin doesn't have that. It's a completely
yeah,
open,
yeah,
beautiful. It really is just an innate. It's a touch. It's just so. It's you just know where you're going, right?
yeah. Well, it's the development of a you could call like a feedback loop, where between your hearing and the sensation of the violin in your hands and and the kind of sound that you want. And so the development process of like learning just the basic process of learning how to play in tune is hearing the note that you want inside first,
Mm,
and then training your body to do that accurately, and then but nobody has perfect intonation. This is one
yeah.
of the things that a story I really loved hearing from one of the great upright bass players. I think it was Edgar Meyer. Fabulous, fabulous musician. And he's
Mm.
known for his intonation, being able to play in tune, even though
Hmm.
there's no frets on the double bass. And he was asked once how he did it, and he said, "Well, there's nothing like just playing in tune all the time. It doesn't happen that way. You take your best guess, and sensitively, you change it. You just
Mm.
change it more quickly. This is all that's happening with somebody who's an expert. Their guesses get better, and they're able to change their actions, more
Mm.
sensitively.
That is so, I love the way you describe that. That's really cool because I've always wondered about those fretless instruments. And my daughter played violin for a short period of
Yeah,
time and then she switched to flute. And yeah, just every instrument has its own subtlety, right? The human
yeah,
voice
yeah,
is a fretless instrument.
yeah,
If you want to think about it that way, right? You're
yeah.
up and down and sort of hearing that, knowing where you
Yes,
want to go and be able to adjust on the fly. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
is huge. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
ain't that life?
Oh my gosh, it's music is just an analogy for life for
Yeah.
sure. I had somebody come on the show recently and she's a leadership coach, but she is a classically trained
Mm,
musician and all of her analogies are just that very thing,
mm,
right? In harmony, the melody, what notes, like everything. So let's take that thought and what you just taught us about really expanding. Give
Hmm.
us a couple tips. How can we remember to use that in our real
Yeah.
life when we're stuck in the middle of a problem is the hardest time to remind us of strategies to use,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how do you remind yourself of that?
So this is something I talk about with all of my students. To work with your own habits, you need to establish some habits in the beginning. Eventually, you'll be able to do this just more as a shift in your being. It'll become second nature to you. But in the beginning, it's really useful to establish a few habits. So the first thing I would recommend is to choose a time to do this needle and thread exercise.
Mm,
Do that every day for at least a week,
okay.
maybe a couple times a day. And that's just to remind yourself that this other possibility exists. And even just that by itself, you'll start to notice that spacious awareness happening in other times of your life just spontaneously. So
Mm.
even if you just did that every day for the next couple weeks, that would make a huge change.
Ooh, I love that.
But then you can also be intentional about when you practice it. So especially bringing it into those moments of challenge. So you could just reflect on your life, your daily activities that present some sort of challenge to you. And maybe we could do this in two levels. Like choose an activity that's not so challenging, like making your coffee in the morning, and just watch yourself in that process. You might just be used to going through the motions, but watch yourself. What happens to your sense of space when you're putting the coffee grinds in the maker? What happens to your sense of space when
Mm,
you're pouring that cup of coffee? Does it get smaller or bigger? And then
yeah.
what you can do is in those moments, I call it the critical moment, where you get tighter or smaller than you'd like. That's when you do a little pause and you practice expanding your sense of space in that moment.
Mm,
So it could be, because you've done this exploration, that it's the moment when you start pouring your coffee that your awareness gets smaller, right? So
mm,
as soon as you put your hand on the coffee cup or the carafe or whatever it is, you pause a little bit and check in. Is my sense of space getting smaller or bigger? And then you intentionally remember the space around you, and then you pour it while remaining with the space around you. And so
mm.
that's how you work with that moment of challenge, even though that's not a very big challenge in that moment. That's how you work with that.
Yeah.
You be intentional, you map it out, and then you practice that spaciousness. And then if you're feeling brave, you can bring this into other moments. Oh, you have a difficult conversation coming up. You can imagine yourself going through that conversation, hearing this other person saying all the things you don't like, and noticing the
Exactly.
space all around this other person, noticing the space
Uh-huh.
all around you. And then
Yeah.
you just see what difference that makes.
Ooh, I love that to take it into relationships. It's so powerful. It reminds me of this Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe
Yeah.
Dispenza's his meditation
Hmm.
because he's constantly trying to expand your space. And he talks
Yeah.
about, the hardest thing to do is break the habit of being you. And I love that you're bringing up that moment of pouring the coffee because we've done that 500 million times.
Yeah.
We do it the same way. We grab the same cup, we grab
Yeah.
the same coffee, we put it in the same spot, we fill it to the, and when you start to become aware of those little things, like you're establishing a practice,
Yeah.
that's the only place change lives in those tiny
Yes.
little things. That's the only,
Absolutely.
right? It's the only place change lives. People
Yeah.
want to wait for this great big aha moment.
That's right.
Those don't usually happen. It's within the
Right.
small decisions that you make every single
That's right.
day. And I
That's
love that you set the intention with it, right?
absolutely. Yeah, that really speaks to me. That's your life right there. That's your life happening right there when you're making the coffee. And
Right.
if you disregard it as an unimportant moment, then you're disregarding your life.
Right? Exactly. So true. I mean, putting a name to it, we talked about naming things. It's mindfulness. It's bringing
Yeah.
mindfulness to becoming aware. And I love that the use of space and time because it just grows
Yeah.
exponentially when you start to become
Yeah.
aware of it. And you're bringing it to your daily events. You're awakening. You're getting out of
Yes.
those patterns that we get in.
Yes.
And we get in those patterns with everything, the coffee, but we
Absolutely.
also do it with the way we practice violin or
Yeah.
piano or our work, the way we prep for our meeting that day. And I love that you're teaching people how to bring this into their lives. It's so much more expansive than,
Yeah.
just music. Again, the musical analogies for life. So we could
Yeah.
just spend a whole show talking about that.
Yeah, totally.
But really getting you back in touch with why you're doing things. That's why I love that you said
Mm-hmm.
intention. That's one of my 5 steps in my book. Intention's a big one
Mm.
because there's an intention behind every single story that we tell. We just are
Yeah.
not aware of it until we stop and
Yeah.
we peel that back. We go, hey, wait, why do I keep telling that story?
Yeah.
And sometimes the intention isn't a good one. And that's
Mm.
okay because now you have a choice. Do I want to keep that or do I want to make a new story? Like,
Yeah.
I can make small changes that will affect my life, which is really
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. Totally.
Really, really, really beautiful. So tell everybody where they can find your book because I know they're dying to get a copy now.
Yeah, well, it's on all the platforms, Amazon and Barnes& and Noble and everything. But you can also go to my website, soulforcearts.com, and you can click on the links there. You can also learn about my Soul Force Arts Institute, my other projects, online communities and programs and all that kind of thing there.
Awesome.
soulforcearts.com.
Soul Force Arts. I'll put it in the show notes, guys. Um, and it's just truly the work you're doing is amazing. And
Mm,
and you, with one musician at a time, you are changing the way that we look at things and the way that people will deliver their art and embrace their gifts. And I really love that. And I know everybody is really, you dropped a lot of wisdom bombs today. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Joseph.
it's been such a pleasure, Carrie. Thank you.
It's been awesome having you. So remember, everybody, it is never too late to live your best story. And go and sign up for my mailing list so you can hear the behind the scenes, what Joseph and I talk about between the little show segments and all the good stuff, and where you can find out more about the show and everything coming up. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and be well.
Thanks for tuning in to Look for the Good with your host, Carrie Rowan, best-selling author and mindset coach. Join us every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. right here at Dreamvisions7 Radio Network. If you weren't able to catch an episode, no worries. Just visit our website to find all the archived episodes of Look for the Good on demand so you don't miss a thing. And remember, it's never too late to live your best story. For additional resources or to find out about how you can work with Carrie directly, visit carrierowan.com for more details.